Hello everybody, it's Litsoc, it's Thursday, and it's very, very cold, isn't it?
Oh yes.
Yes. Winter has arrived, and that's a good jumping off point for my talk on my favourite writer, Ursula K le Guin. Now, I'm not going to talk very long about her because I'm going to read you a story, and then if there's time we'll talk about it. But she is famous for, Miss Humphreys, if you could list about that book. No, not that one.
This one.
Yes, The Left Hand of Darkness. The Left Hand of Darkness is set on a planet called Winter. I think I've mentioned this before when we did Snow last couple of years ago, didn't we?
Yeah.
And it's very topical because the opening sentence is, the king was pregnant. The king was pregnant. This is about a world, not only is it always cold, it's always winter, at least most of the time, but also the gender is very fluid. It's biologically based, and the visitor, who the book focuses on, it is from the Hainish Empire, which is something that she came to develop over many writing years, is like us. Well, he is a heterosexual man, and so he is completely and utterly an alien on this world. He's so different because they can be men or women, and also they have telepathy. So there's a multitude of themes here about human beings in this world. But I'm going right to the beginning, and what I'm going to read to you from this afternoon is from a book called, this is a series of short stories called The Wind's 12 Quarters. And these are still in print. They represent, this particular book represents the beginning of her writing life. She was first published quite late in 1932. Sorry, not 1932. She was 32, and it was the 1960s. She'd had children. She'd got married to a chap she'd met on a boat to France. They were married quite quickly. He is the Le Guin, and this is her pen name. Did any of you know about Ursula Le Guin at all? Do you know? Yeah?
I started reading Earthsea a bit.
Yeah? Yeah? Do you know anything about her?
No.
No? Do you know her nationality? Not even that. Marianne?
I know she slays, but I don't know what
She does. Anybody else?
Come
No?
on, some of you were telling me you'd read it.
I've read some of it, but I just
I
got
don't go
very
deep diving into
bored.
authors' nationalities.
Oh, you didn't say that to me when you mentioned
I
it.
read it a while ago and my tastes have changed, so I might have to revisit it.
Well, Miss Huntley will get you to revisit it.
Yeah.
Let's see.
I've got the
It's not
full
for
books,
everyone.
all 4 books at home. I just...
There are 6 now.
Yeah. 6?
Yeah, there are 6 because she kept going back to it. This is one of the great things that I love about her. She didn't stop with Ged in his youth or even his middle age. He went on until he was an old man. As she got older, so she revisited the stories of Earthsea, and it's a real place. Did you know? Did you know it's a real place?
I've seen maps
Yes.
in the book.
Beautiful maps, yeah. When she came to England, they came quite often to live in England, to spend time here. She and her husband and family, they visited the Scilly Isles. You know where the Scilly Isles are? Annabelle, where are they?
Not
Sorry?
the roundabouts.
The roundabout.
Not that roundabout, no.
No, not the roundabout. No, the
By my
real
house.
Scilly Isles. Hello? No? Anybody know?
Aren't they like really far south? They're pretty much in France, but they belong to Britain.
No, that's the Channel
I
Islands.
think of the Channel Islands.
Channel
yeah.
Islands. Good thought. Scilly Isles are off the coast of Cornwall. And there are what we call an archipelago, and this too is an archipelago. Earthsea.
Sorry.
Get it?
Get it?
Yeah, I get it now. Yeah.
And this is the key to her thought. She was very, very interested in the Tao. This is a Chinese philosophy, the I Ching, and Taoist philosophy, light and dark. You cannot have the light unless you have the dark. You cannot have the dark unless you have the light. You cannot have good unless, I'm afraid, you too have evil. And that's one of her most famous stories as well, which I was going to read you today, but I'm not going to now because I think it's a bit dark for today. Anyway, so here is Earthsea and her wonderful cast of characters, including Ged and Tenar. Can you tell me anything about the peoples?
They're wizards.
Not all of them are, but a lot of them are, yeah.
A lot of them are wizards.
There's a school of wizards, isn't there? Yeah?
Ged's very good at magic.
Yeah. Power, yeah.
He goes to the school for wizards,
Mhm.
and he's pretty good at it. And so some older,
Slightly older, yeah.
Slightly older other students challenge him and say, do this thing, because it's really cool. And I'm going to be honest, I read the first book a while ago, so I'm kind of bringing up 9-year-old me memories right now.
No, you retain
That's
some
pretty-
some
That's
decent
good,
stuff.
yeah.
I'd say.
Yeah.
And then the magic goes horribly wrong, and he summons this shadow,
Yes.
which is evil and malevolent and is darkness and all that is bad in the world. And he then goes on a massive journey around this archipelago to try and find a way to stop the shadow, kill
To
the
call it by
shadow.
its name. To
Cool.
find out its name.
Okay, that's not what I remember. But I remember he tried to get rid of the shadow, and then at the end there was a big reveal that he just had to say its name.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's right.
It was really good.
Yeah.
Read it, guys.
And that's the first novel. But we're really lucky because it's a trilogy, at least the first 3. And then there are more because she kept coming back to it. Anyway, so she's a very, very interesting writer. She wrote fantasy, she wrote science fiction, she wrote dystopian, she wrote philosophy. She wrote about a world where anarchy is the political system. Now, I'm sure to you, anarchy means chaos. But anarchy is not chaos. It's not. Anarchy means that it is a form of self-government. It means that you have no hierarchies. It is entirely classless society. Now, I know this sounds like communism, but in fact, communism turns into tyranny. So this is something else again. This is just shared, and this is another of her most famous novels, The Dispossessed. And also she always wrote short stories that started her exploring these particular concepts. So within this book, The Wind's 12 Quarters, there are many instances of the worlds that she came to explore in lots of other novels and short stories and longer stories as well. So, for example, we have Semele's Necklace. Now, Semele's Necklace is the first story, and it's about a beautiful, beautiful blue sapphire that a young woman goes to find in the depths of space. She doesn't know she's in the depths of space, but she is. And of course, being in the depths of space, she's time travelling, because that's what happens. And it's the exploration of what happens if you go away, leave your home, and what happens to your home. There's another story where she talks about a planet that is nothing but trees. There is nothing else except trees. And she wrote this in the late 1960s. She always kept a close eye on what was going on in science. And in this planet, a group of explorers arrive, and they have to come to terms with the planet and the fact that they are the aliens again, and what they think about it, and how they come to terms with the trees, the forest that is all-knowing. and actually can understand what they're doing. This is long before anybody understood that trees can influence of what's going on around them and how they communicate. She did it first, but obviously she read her scientific papers and things. Her father was an anthropologist. Does anybody know what that is? Marianne?
Study of humans.
Yes, the study of humankind, yeah. And for a lot of her childhood, living in her house, they lived in California, and she went to Berkeley University, Berkeley campus of Southern California University. She had the last of a particular Native American tribe. He was the last of his kind. So can you imagine, he had nobody to learn his language. He had to teach his language to Ursula's father, and then knowing that this was the end. Can you imagine that you're the last of your kind because everybody else has died or been killed or been exploited and gone? In living memory, this is as well. We're used to this happening. For example, like we're used to the fact that, for example, the dodo is extinct because it was hunted to its death, yes? We all know about the dodo, don't we?
Yeah.
But the idea that a tribe that have been there for hundreds of thousands of years just come down to one person, and then when he dies, all their memories are gone because it was an oral culture, not a written one. So that also informs her writing. And she's very, very interested also in power, how people use power, magic, science, but also names and words. So this is what I'm going to read you this afternoon. It's called The Word of Unbinding, and the first thing I'm going to read you is her introduction. So are we sitting comfortably? Yeah? Then I'll begin. So this is Ursula's voice first. The two stories that follow are my first approach to and exploration of the secondary world of Earthsea, with the primary world, obviously, about which I later wrote 3 novels. Now 6. This is written a long time ago. I didn't know much about the place at first, and readers familiar with the trilogy will notice that trolls became extinct in Earthsea at some point, and that the history of the dragon Nevo is somewhat obscured. He must have been on Saturn's Island some decades or centuries before Ged found him and bound him on the Isle of Pendor. But this is only to be expected of dragons who do not submit to the undirectional, casual requirements of history, being myths and neither time-binding nor time-bound. The Rule of Names first explores an essential element of how magic works in Earthsea. The Word of Unbinding foreshadows the end of the last book of the trilogy, The Furthest Shore, in its imagery of the world of the dead. It also reveals a certain obsession with trees, which once you notice them, keep cropping up throughout my work. I think I'm definitely the most arboreal science fiction writer. It's all right for the rest of you who climbed down and developed opposable thumbs and erect posture and all that. There's a few of us still up there swinging. And that's Ursula all over. That's her voice. Long time ago now, but that is her voice. Fun, erudite, obsessive, and also to some extent influenced by Tolkien, but like any 1960s writer, you know, he's a springboard and then they go on. And in Earthsea, there are good dragons, like mine, see? And then there are wilder dragons, not necessarily evil, but they've got their own agenda, and they're not terribly interested in dealing with humankind. Ged is a dragon lord and deals with dragons. And yes, that's another story. So here we go. Where was he? The floor was hard and slimy, the air black and stinking, and that's all there was, except a headache. Lying flat on the clammy floor, Festin moaned and then said, "Staff." When his alderwood wizard staff did not come to his hand, he knew he was in peril. He sat up, and not having his staff with which to make a proper light, he struck a spark between finger and thumb, muttering a certain word. A blue will-o'-the-wisp sprang from the spark and rolled feebly through the air, sputtering. Up, said Festin, and the fireball wobbled upward till it lit a vaulted trapdoor very high above. So high that Festin, projecting into the fireball, momentarily saw his own face 40 feet below as a pale dot in the darkness. Do you think 40 feet is up to the art studio? Yeah. The light struck no reflections in the damp walls. They had been woven out of night by magic. He rejoined himself and said, "Out." The ball expired. Festin sat in the dark, cracking his knuckles. He must have been overspelled from behind by surprise, for the last memory he had was of walking through his own woods at evening, talking with the trees. Lately, in these lone years in the middle of his life, he had been burdened with a sense of waste, of unspent strength. So, needing to learn patience, he had left the villages and gone to converse with trees, especially oaks, chestnuts, and the grey alders, whose roots are in profound communication with running water. It had been 6 months since he had spoken to a human being. He had been busy with essentials, casting no spells and bothering no one. So who had spellbound him and shut him in this reeking well? Who? He demanded of the walls, and slowly a name gathered on them and ran down to him like a thick black drop, sweated out from pores of stone and spores of fungus. Vol. For a moment, Festin was in a good cold sweat himself. He had heard first long ago of Vol the Fell, who was said to be more than wizard, yet less than man, who passed from island to island of the outer reach, undoing the works of the ancients, enslaving men, cutting forests and spoiling fields, and sealing in underground tombs any wizard or mage who tried to combat him. Refugees from ruined islands told always the same tale, that he came at night on a dark wind over the sea. His slaves followed in ships. These they had seen, but none of them had ever seen Vol. There were many men and creatures of evil will among the islands, and Festin, a young warlock intent on his training, had not paid much heed to these tales of Vol the Fell. I can protect this island, he had thought, knowing his untried power, and had returned to his oaks and alders, the sound of wind in their leaves, the rhythm of growth in their round trunks and limbs and twigs, the taste of sunlight on leaves or dark groundwater around roots. Where were they now, the trees, his old companions? Had Vol destroyed the forest? Now, can you see how this is still resonant? This is still very much prevalent. This is the sadness of our world, that this is, we look at the Amazon. Awake at last and up on his feet, Festin made 2 broad motions with rigid hands, shouting aloud a name that would burst all locks and break open any mad-made door. But these walls, impregnated with night and the name of their builder, did not heed, did not hear. The name re-echoed back, clapping in Festin's ears so that he fell on his knees, hiding his head in his arms till the echoes died away in the vaults above him. Then, still shaken by the backfire, he sat brooding. They were right. Vol was strong. Here on his own ground, within this spell-built dungeon, his magic would withstand any direct attack, and Festin's strength was halved by the loss of his staff. But not even his captor could take from him his powers, relative only to himself, of projecting and transforming. So after rubbing his now doubly aching head, he transformed. Quietly, his body melted away into a cloud of fine mist. Lazy, trailing, the mist rose off the floor, drifting up along the slimy walls until it found where vault met wall a hairline crack. Through this droplet by droplet it seeped. It was almost all through the crack when a hot wind, hot as a furnace blast, struck at it, scattering the mist drops, drying them. Hurriedly the mist sucked itself back into the vault, spiraled to the floor, took on Festin's own form, and lay there panting. Transformation is an emotional strain to introverted warlocks of Festin's sort. When to that strain is added the shock of facing unhuman death in one's own assumed shape, the experience becomes horrible. Festin lay for a while merely breathing. He was also angry with himself. It had been a pretty simple-minded notion to escape as a mist, after all. Every fool knew that trick. Vol had probably just left a hot wind waiting. Festin gathered himself into a small black bat, flew up to the ceiling, retransformed into a thin stream of plain air, and seeped through the crack. This time he got clear out and was blowing soft swiftly down the hall in which he found himself towards a window when a sharp sense of peril made him pull together, slapping himself into the first small coherent shape that came to mind, a gold ring. It was just as well. The hurricane of Arctic air that would have dispersed his air form in unrecallable chaos merely chilled his ring form slightly. As the storm passed, he lay on the marble pavement, wondering which form might get out the window quickest. Too late, he began to roll away. An enormous blank-faced troll strode cataclysmically across the floor, stopped, caught the quick rolling ring, and picked it up in a huge limestone-like hand. The troll strode to the trapdoor, lifted it by an iron handle and a muttered charm, and dropped Festin down into the darkness. He fell straight for 40 feet and landed on the stone floor. Clink. Resuming his true form, he sat up, ruefully rubbing a bruised elbow. Enough of this transformation on an empty stomach. He longed bitterly for his staff, with which he could have summoned any amount of dinner. Without it, though he could change his own form and exert certain spells and powers, he could not transform or summon to him any material thing, neither lightning nor a lamb chop. Patience, Festin told himself, and when he had got his breath, he dissolved his body into the infinite delicacy of volatile oils, becoming the aroma of a frying lamb chop. He drifted once more through the crack. The waiting troll sniffed suspiciously, but already Festin had regrouped himself into a falcon, winging straight for the window. The troll lunged after him, missed by yards, and bellowed in a vast stony voice, "The hawk! Get the hawk!" Swooping over the enchanted castle towards his forest that lay dark to the westward, sunlight and sea glare dazzling his eyes, Festin rode the wind like an arrow, but a quicker arrow found him. Crying out, he fell. Sun and sea and towers spun around him and went out. And in the story for Ged, she picks up that hawk again, and Ged transforms himself into a hawk. So these are the roots, the deep roots of Earthsea here. He woke again on the dank floor of the dungeon, hands and hair and lips wet with his own blood. The arrow had struck his pinion as a falcon, his shoulder as a man. Lying still, he mumbled a spell to close the wound. Presently he was able to sit up and recollect a longer, deeper spell of healing, but he had lost a good deal of blood and with it power. A chill had settled in the marrow of his bones, which even this healing spell could not warm. There was darkness in his eyes, even when he struck a will-o'-the-wisp and lit the reeking air, the same dark mist he had seen as he flew, overhanging his forest and the little towns of his land. It was up to him to protect that land. He could not attempt direct escape again. He was too weak and tired. Trusting his power too much, he had lost his strength. Now whatever shape he took would share his weakness, and he trapped. Shivering with cold, he crouched there, letting the fireball sputter out with a last whiff of methane, marsh gas. The smell brought to his mind's eye the marshes stretching from the forest wall down to the sea, his beloved marshes where no men came, where in fall the swans flew long and level, where between still pools and reed islands the quick, silent seaward streamlets ran. Oh, to be a fish in one of those streams, or better yet to be further upstream, near the springs, in the forest, in the shadow of the trees, in the clear brown backwater, under an alder's roots, resting hidden. This was a great magic. Festin had no more performed it than has any man who in exile or danger longs for the earth and waters of his home, seeing and yearning over the doorsill of his house, the table where he has eaten, the branches outside the window of the room where he has slept. Only in dreams do any but the great mages realise this magic of going home. But Festin, with the cold creeping out from his marrow into nerves and veins, stood up between the black walls, gathered his will together till it shone like a candle in the darkness of his flesh, and began to work the great and silent magic. The walls were gone. He was in the earth, rocks and veins of granite for bones, groundwater for blood, the roots of things for nerves. Like a blind worm, he moved through the earth westward, slowly, darkness before and behind. Then all at once coolness flowed along his back and belly, a buoyant, unresisting, inexhaustible caress. With his sides he tasted the water. felt current flow, and with lidless eyes he saw before him the deep brown pool between the great buttress roots of an alder. He darted forward, silvery, into shadow. He had got free. He was home. The water ran timelessly from its clear spring. He lay on the sand of the pool's bottom, letting running water, stronger than any spell of healing, soothe his wound, and with its coolness wash away the bleaker cold that had entered him. But as he rested, he felt and heard a shaking and trampling in the earth. Who walked now in his forest? Too weary to try to change form, he hid his gleaming trout body under the arch of the alder root and waited. Huge grey fingers groped in the water, roiling the sand. In the dimness above water, vague faces, blank eyes loomed and vanished, reappeared. Nets and hands groped, missed again, then caught and lifted him, writhing up into the air. He struggled to take back his own shape and could not. His own spell of homecoming bound him. He writhed in the net, gasping in the dry, bright, terrible air, drowning, and the agony went on, and he knew nothing beyond it. After a long time, and little by little, he became aware that he was in his human form again. Some sharp, sour liquid was being forced down his throat. Time lapsed again, and he found himself sprawled face down on the dank floor of the vault. He was back in the power of his enemy, and though he could breathe again, he was not very far from death. The chill was all through him now, and the trolls, false servants, must have crushed the fragile trout body, for when he moved, his rib cage and one forearm stabbed with pain. Broken without strength, he lay at the bottom of the well of night. There was no power in him to change shape. There was no way out but one. Lying there motionless almost, but not quite beyond the reach of pain, Festin thought, why has he not killed me? Why does he keep me here alive? Why has he never been seen? With what eyes can he be seen? On what ground does he walk? He fears me, though I have no strength left. They say that all the wizards and men of power whom he has defeated live on sealed in tombs like this, live on year after year, trying to get free. But if one chose not to live? So Festin made his choice. His last thought was, if I'm wrong, men will think I was a coward. But he did not linger on this thought. Turning his head a little to the side, he closed his eyes, took a last breath, deep breath, and whispered the word of unbinding, which is only spoken once. This was not transformation. He was not changed. His body, the long legs and arms, the clever hands, the eyes that liked to look on trees and streams, lay unchanged, only still, perfectly still and full of cold. But the walls were gone. The vaults built by magic were gone, and the rooms and towers, and the forest, and the sea, and the sky of evening. They were all gone. And Festin went slowly down the far slope of the hill of being, under new stars. In life he had had great power, so here he did not forget. Like a candle flame he moved in the darkness of the wider land, and remembering, he called out his enemy's name. Vol. Called, unable to withstand, Vol came towards him, a thick, pale shape in the starlight. Festin approached, and the other cowered and screamed as if burnt. Festin followed when he fled, followed him close. A long way they went, over dry lava flows from the great extinct volcanoes rearing their cones against the unnamed stars, across the spurs of silent hills, through valleys of short black grass, past towns or down their unlit streets between houses through whose windows no face looked. The stars hung in the sky, none set, none rose. There was no change here. No day would come. But they went on, Festin always driving the other before him, till they reached a place where once a river had run very long ago. A river from the living lands. In the dry stream bed, among boulders, a dead body lay. that of an old man, naked, flat eyes staring at the stars that are innocent of death. "Enter it," Festin said. The Vol's shadow whimpered, but Festin came closer. Vol cowered away, stooped, and entered in the open mouth of his own dead body. At once the corpse vanished. Unmarked, stainless, the dry boulders gleamed in starlight. Festin stood a while, then slowly sat down among the great rocks to rest. To rest, not sleep, for he must keep guard here until Vol's body, sent back to its grave, had turned to dust. All evil power gone, scattered by the wind and washed seaward by the rain. He must keep watch over this place, where once death had found a way back into the other land. Patient now, infinitely patient, Festin waited among the rocks where no river would ever run again, in the heart of the country which has no seacoast. The stars stood still above him, and as he watched them, slowly, very slowly, he began to forget the voice of streams and the sound of rain on the leaves of the forests of life. Do you understand what's happened to him?
Yeah, pretty sad.
What's extraordinary is this was written in the 1960s, and she comes back to this land in the 1990s, and it's also in the last book of the trilogy, and they have to cross this wall of stones, and that wall of stones, the dead weight. She changes it slightly. The dead weight. In the last book that she wrote about, last full novel she wrote about Earthsea, something amazing happens, and dragons and people come together, and the dead land is transformed, and it's one of the most beautiful endings to a saga that I've ever read. But it's extraordinary to think that the roots of Earthsea are there, right, deep down. And this is what she's so fabulous. She writes a story, she moves on, but she comes back to it. And then what happened in Earthsea was that women came to the fore, and she writes about Tenar. And Tenar is not only the white lady from the Kargad lands, because everybody in Earthsea is either Native American, in other words, a bronzed, dark-haired, or is black, except for the Kargad lands, which are the barbarians and are white. And it's not easy to know that unless you really, really read it carefully. So again, completely without trying to make an enormous point, we have the civil rights very early on in her writing. And the story collection is called after this poem by, she's American, but this poem is by an Englishman, and it's taken from a series of poems called A Shropshire Lad, which was written as long ago as 1902. From far from eve and morning, and yon 12-winded sky, the stuff of life to knit me flew hither, here am I. Now for a breath I tarry, nor yet disperse apart. Take my hand quick and tell me, what have you in your heart? Speak now and I will answer. How shall I help you? Say, ere to the wind's 12 quarters I take my endless way. My favourite.
What else is in A Shropshire Lad?
Is my team ploughing?
No, there's something that you brought up, A Shropshire Lad in English.
Yeah, disabled. Remember I said that?
Yes,
I
there we
said that
go.
Wilfred Owen
Yeah.
would have known a Shropshire Lad, especially as he's a Shropshire Lad himself. Yeah. So, thanks for listening, everybody.
Thank you, Miss Huntley.
She's well worth coming back to. Even
Oh,
if you
yeah.
don't like her now, you'll like her when you're grown up.